Hello, you're watching Unit 3 on implementing Plaid in Bubble.io. It's about payments in ACH. I'm Brian Alderman, the owner and principal of Lost Sheep Advisory, the developer of the Plaid plugin that you're using. Lost Sheep Advisory is a boutique no-code consulting firm that specializes in financial and business operations solutions. You can see more of what we do at lostsheep.dev. I'm the creator of Ivy Code app and the developer behind a number of other Bubble apps. You can work with us in a number of ways. By subscribing to the Plaid plugin from Lost Sheep Advisory, you have free email support for that Plaid plugin. Feel free to reach out anytime at info@lostsheep.dev. We also offer a number of ways to work with you in a more in-depth way, including on-demand Bubble office hours that you can book at lostsheep.dev, full development projects to help you execute your vision, and fractional CTO efforts to contribute strategy and expert ownership of your technology. In this video today about payments, we are going to be covering ACH payments through Stripe. ACH payments are another way of moving money through the payment system. In particular, it's one that is fairly low cost. I believe the current Stripe rate is 0.8% fees for ACH payments instead of credit cards, which can be 3.5, or more percent. Your particular deal with Stripe may vary, but that's what I've seen as common. ACH payments are becoming more and more common because customers are getting more and more used to them. Rather than having to enter your routing number and account number, using a technology like Plaid lets a customer use their online banking credentials to give you that data without sharing the most sensitive pieces of it with your application, which lowers the barriers to entry to collecting the data for ACH payments. Another piece of this to be aware of, though, is ACH payments have a different time frame than credit card payments. They're not as instantaneous. It takes a little longer to get the money in your bank account, but that could be worth it for your particular app. So in this video, we're going to show you how to set up ACH as a payment method on a new customer Stripe profile. We'll talk a little bit about how to manage those different Stripe profiles too. Show you how to initiate an ACH payment with the customer, and know how to change their ACH payment method for an existing customer. Let's say they have a new bank account they want to pay for your app with. Before we get into Bubble, let's go over the basic flow of how ACH payments work with Plaid. So the first step is your app's going to request a secure token from Plaid. In the background, Plaid and Stripe will communicate directly, or whatever other payment provider. I'll talk more about that in a bit. But Plaid and Stripe will communicate directly to share the account details that are needed and a secure account token that gets generated. Plaid will then send that secure account token back to your app, and you then use that secure account token with a Stripe customer to then request Stripe to charge the customer's account, which Stripe then does. So in this scenario, your app never sees the bank account number or the routing number. You don't need it. You don't really want it as part of your application for security reasons. So that's what we're going to be setting up today. Just a brief overview. Let's dive in and get started. As I jump over to Bubble here, I'm on my plugins page. The very first thing we're going to need to do is go get this Stripe plus Plaid ACH plugin from Lost Sheep Advisory. This is an additional plugin to the Plaid Up-to-Date for OAuth plugin that you've probably already been using, and just to note, you should have already gone through the Plaid link setup before you start this video. That's covered in a separate video. But go ahead and add that Stripe plus Plaid ACH plugin to your app, and let's go ahead and get it set up. This is the part of the plugin that handles specifically the your app to Stripe interconnection in the way that's needed for ACH. The Bubble-built Stripe plugin doesn't quite do what's needed to make ACH work, so you need this other plugin. Then what you're going to need to go do is fill out the username fields with your Stripe secret key. So I get that on my dashboard. I'm in development mode right now, in test mode, so I'm just going to pull that key, and you need your secret key. I'm just going to copy that. I'm grabbing my test key here. You probably want to use your test key for the dev version down here. I can paste that in here. And then for my case, I'm putting that same one in production in the username field. You'll put your actual production secret key in there. Password's not needed for the Stripe integration. It's just that username that you need. So once we're all set up there, there's one other thing we need to go do, and this time it's in the Plaid dashboard. So if you go into your Plaid dashboard at dashboard.plaid.com and go over to Team Settings, and under Integrations, you'll see all the different payment providers that Plaid partners with. These are all the different options that you can use to run your actual payments. We're going to be focusing on Stripe here, but any of these other ones will work. I've just not built plugins to work with these different payment platforms. I'm working on one with Dawala. That's a different conversation for another day. But we're going to focus on Stripe. If you need to use one of these other ones for some reason, let's say they give you a better deal, you already have a relationship with them, etc., you can work on that plugin using the same method. I'll show you how in a minute to get the Plaid tokens and continue on from there. Or get in touch. Happy to talk to you about different payment options. So what you need to do here is when you come into this dashboard, it will say connect or enable next to Stripe. Go ahead and enable it. Go through your Stripe flow. It'll ask you for your Stripe password and connect your Plaid and Stripe accounts. And once that's done, you will be all set and ready to go. From there, we can jump back into Bubble. I'm going to be working here in my test app, and what I've done is each of those 4 big steps we set up earlier, I've got a different button to trigger them. So we're going to walk through and set up the workflows for each of these things now. The first step is to go through the Plaid link flow, and we covered that extensively in the Plaid link video. Go take a look at that. There are a couple different things I want to talk about with the Plaid auth flow in particular. Auth meaning payments for Plaid. The first thing is when I click that Plaid link new account button, it's going to do the same things we talked about in the Plaid link video, but this time, instead of transactions or some other product, I'm using the auth product. So that's in square brackets and the quotes auth. If you want more detail, and again, I cover this in more detail in the Plaid link video, you'll see here under create link token, once Bubble decides to load, you'll see under create link token that I actually am using, I've set this up a little differently, but I'm using my workflows. There we go. I'm using my workflow text as the Plaid products. So that's why back on that Plaid Stripe auth page, when I say link new account, I'm saying it's an auth product as part of the create link token step, just to connect the dots. So that auth product tells Plaid I want to initiate an account connection for payment purposes, and it will filter the list of banks that your user sees to only those that have the auth product supported. The next thing I want to talk about is the accounts that you actually get back from Plaid. So if you remember from the Plaid link video, there's a process of going through and asking Plaid what are the details of all of the accounts that my user has connected, and then those show up. Let's see that in action here. If you remember in that video, we created a list of accounts. So in my database, Plaid accounts, institutions, accounts. I want, let's say, the account name to show up. I'm just creating a list of radio buttons for the sake of example. So if I go ahead and preview this, let's see what's going on. So all we've done so far, right, is we've gotten our Plaid link button to start a new link session. Let's do that here. Link a new account. And I can pick any of these to start with. And it'll go through and it'll link a new account. You'll notice as soon as I finished my username and password and hit confirm there, it proceeded. You may have experienced some different things in other videos, and what's going on there is that Plaid has a customized experience called account selection. So if I go back to my Plaid dashboard for a minute while that's loading in the background, and go over to customize, this is different ways you can customize your Plaid link session. One of them being account select. In an account select, there's three options. There's disabled account select, so as soon as a user puts in their username and password, it'll just continue and be done. You can enable it for one account, which is this view that's currently highlighted, where your user in Plaid Link will pick a particular account, or multiple accounts. You can select multiple, have your user select multiple here and then hit continue. The challenge with this is the way Plaid actually tells you about these accounts is not super clean right now. They're working on changing this feature. So take this all with a grain of salt, and you can look for an updated video in the future. But right now, I actually recommend leaving this disabled, and you'll have your user pick which account they actually want to use in your app rather than in Plaid. The reason for that is when you have the account for one account or multiple accounts selected, Plaid doesn't actually really tell you about that in a useful way. All of the accounts get connected regardless. So when I come back here, all of my accounts are here, and what you could do instead here is have your users say, pick which account they want to run payments from. Another piece of the puzzle there is ACH payments only work from primarily checking, though it can work with savings, but primarily checking accounts. So one thing you might want to do when you're giving your user the different options is to filter the list of options, or even only save the list of options in your database that makes sense with subtype equals checking. So that'll only show up, in this case, the one account that's eligible or that I want for ACH in this case. All right, so now that we've set it up to enable a user to pick the account that they want to pay from, we actually need to go through the next step, which, if you'll recall, is to request a secure account token, get that account detail shared with Stripe, and get the secure account token back from your app. So 1, 2, and 3. So that's what we're going to do next here. I'm going to do that based off this add account to Stripe, create customer action. So if I go into this workflow, I can go into the Plaid plugin and find the auth get Stripe account token option. Let me add here also for processors other than Stripe as well. You'll see so in the Stripe account token, it takes an access token and an account ID. It already knows it's going to Stripe because it's part of the Stripe plugin. This other one, which is part of the Plaid plugin, access token, account ID, and processor name like Dwala or DriveWell. If you are using a different one of those, you can use this action and go on from there. But I'm going to just use Stripe, so I'll delete that one. So I've added the auth get Stripe account token. I need my access token of the institution that the user linked earlier, and I need the account ID of the option the user selected earlier. So I'm going to use radio buttons values account ID in there. Once I get the Stripe account token set up, that will take care of that step. Then I actually need to then send that on to Stripe. So I'll go look for the Stripe ACH testing actions, and I want to create a Stripe customer with a Plaid account. You'll notice what this takes in is Stripe token from Plaid. That's step number 1. You'll see the result is Stripe bank account token. That's that secure token that Plaid has created for us, and now we're going to send it back to Stripe. So that's all we need to do here to get the account added to Stripe. The other thing, of course, is to set up our user ID. Maybe we'd say the current user's unique ID in here. What that does is just set the user ID parameter over in Stripe so that you can tell who's who on the Stripe side. This does create a new Stripe customer. So if you go into your Stripe dashboard, right, and look at customers, this will create a brand new customer here in the customer list. If you're looking to update an existing customer, we'll talk about that in just a minute of how you update an account on an existing customer. But just a word of caution there. Existing customers can get a little complicated. It's possible to do this to an existing customer that you created through, let's say, the Bubble plugin for Stripe. It just gets a little confusing because it doesn't, the Bubble built Stripe plugin doesn't make it easy to get to the correct user ID that's needed here. You can play with it, or please do get in touch. So back in Bubble, I've created my Stripe customer. The next thing I need to do is just save that customer ID somewhere. I'm just going to put mine in the state for this element. So on my particular page, I'm working with the see it in action option. I'm just going to say Stripe customer ID is text, and I just want to save the result of step 2's body ID. That's the customer ID that's created. That's what I'll need in a minute to actually run a payment. So back in my UI side, here we go. There's the Stripe customer ID. I can grab that state that I just created, the see it in action Stripe customer ID state. And let's see what's going on here. If I go through preview mode, so in preview mode, we can go through the link new account flow. Same way we've been doing before. Once that processes, we'll start seeing the account show up. We'll only see here the checking account because that's what we set our filter to, because that's the one we want our customer to pick. But let's say they had multiple checking accounts, they could pick the correct one here. Then I'll go ahead and trigger that workflow we just set up to create the account at Stripe and do that token interchange, and we'll see that's successful when Stripe sends me a customer ID. If I go look at that customer ID in my Stripe portal, we will see here, there's the user that was just created. We'll see it set up the bank account that was connected, which is just the Stripe test bank account in here as the payment method. Now we can go ahead and charge our customer. So that's the next workflow we want to set up. So if I go back in here and go into the charge our customer workflow, I can go find the action, charge Stripe customer with bank account. Let's just say I'm going to do $10 with Stripe. All of the amounts are in cents, so $10 is 1,000. And then I just need the customer ID that was created a second ago. So I've stored that as part of my see it in action state. You might have saved this into your database. Wherever you need it, go get that customer ID that's needed here, and you put it in there. And then this will create that charge. One other thing I want to do then is get the result of that. So you can, again, save this to your database. I'm just going to create a new state, call it transaction ID, just to make sure we can see what's going on here. I'm going to go grab from step 1. The result there, you see all the different things that you can get from Stripe, including the ID, the amount, the currency, failure codes and failure messages, status messages. I'm just going to put the ID in there, and maybe I'll do the status too so that we can talk about that. Transaction status. So you'll want to save these to your database probably. I'm just saving them as states for the sake of this demo. So I'm going to grab the status here. And that will take care of charging the customer $10 whenever they click that button. It's going to use the customer ID that we created in the previous step. So it'll take whichever account they've selected, it'll use the customer ID that was tied to that account, and then charge the customer $10. So let's see that in action. So coming back over here to preview mode. Let me go through this again. So linking that new account to my app. It's creating those accounts in the background. In a second here, I will get to pick the checking account. I want to add that account to Stripe and create the customer. So I will get a new customer ID here. And I want to go ahead and just charge that customer $10. So I've gone ahead and done that, and it, you can see here, created a transaction ID, and it set it to transaction status pending. So one thing to be aware of with ACH transactions is they will always be pending first. ACH transactions can take a couple days to go from pending to success or sometimes failure. We'll talk more about some of handling that and the whys behind that later. the important thing to know is that you should handle pending and you should set up Stripe webhooks. I'll leave that exercise to you to know when your transaction goes from pending to success. So if I go look now too in my Stripe portal, I could go over to payments and I'll see here's that $10 transaction that we just ran. You'll see here it's already moved to succeeded. If I look at the history here, you'll see it was pending. Then it moved to succeeded a little later on. That's just a test environment thing. It won't do that as quickly in real life. But that's how I know it's working, is it's going through and it's moving from pending to succeeded. The last thing I want to show you how to do is use this last button. Let's say your customer changes their mind. They want to use a different account to pay your app. You can set that up using another workflow. Let's say I have my update bank account option here. I can use the update Stripe customer bank account option. This uses the Stripe customer that was created earlier rather than the Plaid option. And it needs a Stripe token from Plaid. So what we actually have to do here first is go just get another same action we did earlier. So very similar to add a new account, we go get a Stripe account token from Plaid. These account tokens can only be used once. So every time you do this, once you use it with Stripe, you have to come do this action with Plaid again. So that's just what I'm doing here, is the same thing, access token and account ID for the account that I want Plaid to give me a secure access token to. Then I take that, and in this update action, now what's different here is, if you remember on the add account, this action was create an account. I was passing the user ID and the Stripe token. This time in the update account, I'm passing the Stripe customer since they already exist, and the account token from step 1. And that will change the account that's associated. So I could go through and do that again and show you the update bank account action, that works. So let me hit refresh and do that now. While this is loading, I do want to talk for a second about a couple details related to implementing ACH in your application. These details are all covered if you scroll down on the Plaid Stripe auth page at lostsheep.dev or read the description of the Stripe plus Plaid plugin. They're all covered down at the bottom here with some links to Stripe documentation. The important things to be aware of is that you have a requirement from Stripe to collect ACH authorization for customers. So the Plaid piece of this handles verification of the account. You're still required to collect authorization, or you can be liable for chargebacks, et cetera, et cetera. So there's some guidance in here about how to do that. That's on you with your app. The other thing to be aware of, there's another link in that guide on the ACH Payments workflow that talks about some of what I was talking about a minute ago of the process that goes through pending and succeeded or failures, and how long it takes for transactions to show up on your customers' bank account statements and money to get deposited into your accounts. You can learn more detail about that and the ACH Payments workflow at the link at losscheap.dev. So back to my demo mode for a second to see this one more time in action. I can link a new account here. Once I link a new account and it shows up, I can pick the account just like my user would do to say, hey, charge this account. I can add that account to my Stripe customer, and that'll create that new Stripe customer. And then once I've got that Stripe customer created, I can charge the customer, let's say, their subscription fee for the month. That'll go through and be pending, and then that transaction will go through its process. And let's say later on the customer wanted to change their payment method, they could link a new account, pick a different one. I could update the bank account here, and that would go through the workflow. And you could see that, I don't have it set up this way, but you could see that the bank account on the customer had changed, either in your database as you save the results, or back in your Stripe dashboard, I could see some of the payment methods changing. That is how to set up ACH payments in your application. So just to recap, We've set up an ACH as a payment method on the new customer Stripe profile that gets a verified account attached to their Stripe profile that you can use for ACH payments going forward. We initiated that payment with the customer, and we saw briefly how to change the payment method or the account connected to that existing customer. So from there, you should be good to go getting payments through ACH running in your application. As always, reach out info@lostsheep.dev if you have any comments, questions, or concerns. I'm happy to chat, and thank you for watching.